You're not still drawing those lame, childish doodles, are you? I was startled by the voice and turned around to find my stepmother, who I hadn't heard from in 13 years, standing there with her arms crossed in arrogance. I bet you're not living a decent life, are you? What on earth are you doing here? Don't tell me you're begging? Her mocking sneer, filled with disdain, brought back a flood of painful memories. I will never forgive this woman. This is at a corner cafe. In the quiet interior of the shop, my stepmother's shrill laughter echoed, instantly drawing the eyes of everyone around. That same condescending attitude hadn't changed over the years. I vowed to make sure she would never open her mouth again. Yes, thanks to you. Then, as if on cue, a man entered the shop, announcing his arrival. This man was the one I had arranged to meet, but he was actually my stepmother's. The stepmother couldn't hide her surprise at the man's unexpected appearance. True success isn't about living a parasitic life, relying on someone else's money to have it easy, but rather it's a single ray of light that comes from sticking to your convictions and tirelessly working hard. My stepmother finally understood this, but by then it was too late, and the final words told to her by the man sealed her fate, leading her life to become desolate without saying more. Those words I'll never forget. My name is Susan Adams. Influenced by my mother, a painter and art school teacher, my love for drawing since childhood led me to successfully enter the competitive art college I aimed for, and I now dedicate my days to creating art pieces. Starting with sketches inspired by my mother's paintings, I grew fascinated with expressing my imaginative world through art, cherishing the time spent sketching beside her. In the future, I want to become an artist who can captivate people just like my mother. To this big dream, my mother would nod strongly and always supported me. She was such a kind mother. Mom, I'm off. I have loads of assignments today, but I'll do my best. My daily routine now is to join my hands in prayer to the photo of my smiling mother, say goodbye, and leave the house. In fact, my mother passed away when I was in elementary school, becoming my guardian angel. Amid this, a certain person's piercing gaze always finds me. This person, always glaring at me with watchful eyes, is my stepmother, whom my father remarried during my high school years. My stepmother, who saw me, a serious art club member working diligently on my paintings, as gloomy and dull, constantly mocked me. Always cooped up in your room drawing, what are you even thinking? Such a weird kid. She'd say, throwing me a look of contempt and scoffing. This was my daily reality. Even now, as an art college student, the slander continues. I only got in by luck with no real talent, and studying art will never be useful for the future, she claims. She must have been pretending before the marriage. Think of me as your real mom and feel free to talk about anything, she'd say with a smile, promising to create a supportive environment for my art, claiming I'm rooting for you. But that kindness was all a lie. After the marriage, she turned on me, especially when we were alone. Her nastiness became evident. My anger knew no bounds when she deliberately ruined my work, intended for a competition, by pouring used cooking oil over it. Instead of apologizing to me, trembling with anger, my stepmother insulted my worthless paintings and kicked other artworks around before leaving the room. I still can't forgive her actions to this day. Yet, I remained silent. In front of my father, she played the part of a doting mother with a disturbingly sweet smile, and since their marriage seemed happy, I couldn't shatter the happiness my father had finally found after raising me alone since my mother's passing. The rift between my stepmother and me only deepened over time. I channeled these unresolved feelings into my college life, putting even more effort into my artwork. Especially busy before competitions or project deadlines, I'd stay up late at the university working on my creations, valuing every moment so much that I started staying at a friend's place near campus. Home became just a place I returned to occasionally, enduring my stepmother's usual sarcasm and malice only during those times, but leaving felt like being freed, lightening my spirits. I decided to avoid seeing that person's face as much as possible. Just as I was living day by day with that thought, I got a call from my dad after a long time. We had both been busy, and recently we hadn't seen much of each other or even talked, but I was sure my father was doing fine. That's what I believed until my dad, on the other end of the phone, hit me with shocking news that left me speechless. He had cancer. And it had metastasized to various organs, leaving him with little hope for recovery. Why had he kept this from me until now? Unable to hold back my tears, I sat down on the floor. The intense shock shook me so deeply that I found myself alone in the university studio, crying out loud, forgetting myself in my grief. I don't want to go through this pain anymore. I can't stand to lose anyone else. Why, after my mother, is my father being taken from me too? Why am I being left alone? Late at night, I returned home. All the lights were off, plunging the house into darkness. My stepmother must have already gone to bed. I thought I heard my father's voice saying welcome back, but it was just my imagination, and sitting quietly in front of my mother's photo, I faced the reality that my father wasn't there in the house. Mom, please save Dad! The next morning, I left the house early and headed to the hospital where my father was. Susan, thank you for coming early in the morning despite being busy. My father greeted me with a gentle gaze, his voice weak and slightly hoarse. It was hard to imagine him so frail and thin, a stark contrast to his usual vitality, now connected to so many tubes and confined to his bed. Tears overflowed from my eyes again at the sight of him. Dad, how did this happen? Why didn't you tell me sooner? To that, my father, apologizing while smiling weakly. I didn't want to be a burden to you, Susan, who's working so hard. I never imagined it would get this bad. He had felt a bit off but attributed it to aging and continued his normal life. However, one day, he suddenly couldn't swallow food and felt a tightness in his chest. A rush to the hospital and subsequent tests revealed cancer in his esophagus. After treatments and surgery, it seemed the cancer was gone, but then it metastasized to his stomach and spine, leaving him with little hope for recovery. If only I had gone to the hospital sooner, if it had been caught in the early stages, this might not have happened. Saying that, my father looked up at the window. Or maybe it's Mom's jealousy over me remarrying. Looking at me again, my father smiled weakly. I was filled with a sense of helplessness. Mom would never do something like that. Knowing her, she'd probably say it's too soon for you to join her and send you back. So please, Dad, fight this. Don't leave me alone. After saying this, my father apologized again. Then, my days became a cycle of going back and forth between the hospital and college. Fortunately, my dad's room was private, and family stays were allowed, so I spent every night on a cot next to his bed. Day by day, my father's voice grew weaker and raspier, to the point where it was hard to make out what he was saying. Even so, we enjoyed a slow conversation. Susan, make your dream come true. I want you to fulfill the promise you made with Mom. I always loved the paintings my wife made. Reflecting on Mother like that, my father would look at me with a strong gaze. I was surprised when you started drawing as a child, it was so similar to Mom's gentle paintings. You've inherited Mom's talent. So, don't give up. Fulfill your promise to create art together with Mom. Even after remarrying, my father always thought of Mom. He cherished the memories with her deeply. Dad, thank you. Thank you for raising me with all your might. Yes, I promise. I'll never give up, no matter what. I'll fulfill my promise to Mom. My father will soon lose his sight and won't be able to hear my voice. That's why I want to express my feelings to my dad now. So that I won't have any regrets if he were to close his eyes tomorrow. Now, I'm going to express all my gratitude. Then, day by day, my dad's strength weakened and his breathing became erratic. Eventually, he no longer recognized my voice and quietly passed away. Dad, you've worked hard. Now, you can relax with Mom. I spoke these final words to my now cold father and bowed my head. Thank you. My father's funeral was carried out smoothly, and as many people saw him off, he embarked on his journey to the sky. Just as life began to slowly return to normal, my stepmother, looking at my father's portrait next to my mother's photo, opened her mouth. Sigh, how am I supposed to live now? I need to find someone else to earn money. Shocked by her words, I couldn't help but glare at her. What exactly does that mean? Noticing my stern gaze, my stepmother, with a calm face, smirked and said, in this world, your happiness is determined by how well you can cling to those with money. You're old enough to understand that, aren't you? Instead of foolishly drawing all the time, you should learn that skill, and with that, she walked into the back of the room. Was her marriage to my father all for the money? A shock I had never felt before ran through my body, and with my heartbeat quickening, a strong anger began to rise. No wonder my stepmother never visited my father during his illness. In fact, the only times she visited the hospital were on the first day of my father's admission and a few times when paperwork was necessary. Even as my father's consciousness faded, she never showed up, claiming to be busy. Probably, she was busy at home dealing with the insurance company. Indeed, my stepmother was the beneficiary of my father's life insurance, and not a penny went to me. She must have deceived my father, saying she intended to share it with me after receiving it. But no matter how much money she received, it could never replace my father. The value of a human life can never be exchanged for money. Oh, right, why don't you just leave this house? Even though I couldn't see her, I could hear my stepmother's unpleasant voice from the back of the room. I instinctively wanted to cover my ears. You do whatever you want. Have you any idea how much money that costs? How can you so carefreely live in this house, you money eater? Don't you ever think about working to help with the household expenses? I wanted to throw those words right back at her. My stepmother, a housewife, would finish the bare minimum of household chores and then spend her time watching TV until my father came home. She went out a lot, enjoying luxurious lunches and shopping with friends, and even overnight trips as she pleased. My father never showed any displeasure at my stepmother's actions, and she must have been quite satisfied with living life exactly as she wanted. While attending college, I tried to find time to work part-time jobs to help out, but due to my dad's strong wish for me to forge ahead with my dream and focus on painting, I decided to concentrate on my life at university. My stepmother probably didn't know about this interaction between us as parent and child. I don't need to be told, I'll pack my bags and leave. There's no reason for me to stay with someone as despicable as you any longer. You're not my mother, or anything to me. I've reached my limit. I understand she doesn't like having a stepchild. But I truly believed that she at least loved my father. However, her gaze was not on my father, but on his wealth. What's with that attitude? Who do you think has been taking care of such an unlovable, gloomy person like you? Show a little gratitude. When have I ever been taken care of by my stepmother? Such a pointless argument, a waste of time. I'll pack my things and leave in a few days. Let's end our relationship here. Don't ever involve yourself with me again. Uncontainable anger welled up as tears. It's time to end such demeaning quarrels. Thanks to a will left by my father, a larger portion of his inheritance was allocated to me. Taking the inheritance, memories of my parents, art supplies, and a few daily necessities, I left the house. My life living alone, while financially tight, was spent sparingly using my father's inheritance, juggling part-time jobs between my studies, and dedicating myself to art production. Years passed, and on a day in the 13th spring since leaving home, I was at a cafe on a street corner for a meeting. Arriving earlier than the meeting time in the quiet cafe filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, I leisurely enjoyed the view outside the window. Watching cherry blossom petals quietly fall, I was struck by their beautiful yet fleeting strength, enjoying this peaceful moment away from the hustle and bustle, all by myself. That's it, I'll paint the cherry-lined streets my mother loved, filling the canvas. Then, the cafe door opened and I heard the staff say, "Welcome." I instinctively looked towards the voice to see a customer in a flashy pink dress that seemed out of place in the wood-toned calm of the cafe. Huh? This must be a joke. It was a face I recognized. However, I quickly averted my eyes and turned my gaze back outside the window. This couldn't be happening. We weren't supposed to meet again. Then, the sound of footsteps approached, and a flash of flashy pink caught my eye. Hey, you. It couldn't be my stepmother. I turned my face away from that annoying voice. Why are you ignoring me? I spoke to you since it's been a while. You're as unpleasant as ever. The sudden shouting from my stepmother changed the atmosphere of the quiet cafe in an instant. As I turned around in surprise, her verbal onslaught didn't stop. You're not still drawing those childish, tacky pictures at your age, are you? Trying to make a living with such a gloomy hobby is just impossible. Haven't you started to see reality yet? Her condescending attitude towards me hasn't changed even after 13 years. My stepmother's tactless remarks echoed throughout the cafe, leaving the people around us perplexed. You're not leading a decent life, are you? What exactly are you doing here? You're not begging, are you? Her words, filled with scorn, brought back painful memories. But I'm no longer the person who is scared of her. I will never forgive this woman. Or perhaps, you want to come back home? Unfortunately for you, I've remarried and live in that house with my new husband. Well, if you pay rent properly, I might let you live there. It seems she's tricked another wealthy man into a comfortable life. It's audacious how she can claim our house, filled with so many memories, as her own. Yes, thanks to you. I had kept my silence, not wanting to be swallowed by such a vulgar person's taunts, but I've reached my breaking point. I'll make sure she never opens her mouth again. I've had my struggles, but now I have a stable income and live a peaceful life in a new apartment near the station. My stepmother seemed a bit taken aback by my unexpected response, but due to her fixed notion of me, she refused to acknowledge the truth. What are you talking about? Where near the station is there a new small apartment? Are you dreaming? Or have you given up on reality and retreated into a fantasy world? I can't take it anymore. Just being in the presence of such a selfish and oblivious stepmother makes me nauseous. It seemed impossible to wait until the appointed time. Apologizing to the person I was supposed to meet, I stood up to leave. Just then, a man's voice came from behind. Unfortunately, it appeared the man I was supposed to meet had just arrived. He was a magazine journalist, and in fact, I was at this cafe to be interviewed by him. The thought of being associated with this flashy, tasteless woman was troubling. It would be bad if it became widely known. In a panic, I tried to take the journalist outside when suddenly, why are you here? Didn't you say today was an important day for an interview? Is your work finished? My stepmother, flustered by the man's arrival, stumbled over the leg of a chair with her high heels and fell to the floor with a thud. What are you doing here now? Weren't you supposed to go to a job interview today? With that outfit, have you lied again? Although the situation was unclear, it seemed the two knew each other somehow. Determined not to cause any more commotion inside the cafe, I took the two, who were about to start arguing, and left the shop. You're lying too, aren't you? You were all excited about interviewing the talked-about painter today. And yet, here you are in a secret meeting with this gloomy girl. Could it be an affair? As soon as we stepped outside, my stepmother started making a scene. I was dumbfounded by her vulgar remarks that hadn't changed over the years. You! How dare you speak to the teacher like that? Apologize. You've been nothing but rude since the start. Who do you think you are? At the journalist's words, my stepmother froze a bit. I deeply apologize, teacher. This is my wife, who tends to jump to conclusions and has a habit of speaking her mind without filtering her words. I will speak to her later. The journalist apologized to me. It's embarrassing to be called a teacher, but indeed, my paintings are currently attracting attention. My painting, which won an award in a competition, caught the eye of a famous artist who commented on its vivid and soft touch and shared it on social media. This sparked a wave of interest, and now my art is featured on scarves and umbrellas in collaboration with a renowned brand, displayed in stores. The buzz didn't die down. A world-famous artist who liked it wore a t-shirt printed with my painting in a new song's promotional video. The video's views skyrocketed, and orders for the t-shirt flooded in from around the world. I'm still amazed by the response, but I'm thrilled that the art I learned to love from my mother is being seen by so many people. To spread my mother's passion for painting, I actively accept magazine interviews. My stepmother, finally accepting the truth, couldn't hide her surprise and exclaimed, "Why would anyone care about your silly paintings?" but was quickly reprimanded by the journalist again. My paintings might be silly to you, but they are recognized by many. Thanks to that, my current residence is not the rundown apartment you imagine, but a high-rise with a beautiful night view near the station. Then, from the cafe, a woman came out holding a handkerchief. Excuse me, are you Ms. Adams? I noticed you inside. I hesitated to approach, but I'm a fan of yours. Could I get your autograph here? She asked, unfolding a handkerchief printed with my painting. I happily signed it, exchanged handshakes, and bowed to the woman as she left with joy. Despite taking your time today, my wife ruined the interview with her rude behavior, and I sincerely apologize. I will definitely make it up to you, and I hope we can reschedule the interview for another day. The journalist bowed to me several times and then led my stepmother away by the hand. Left alone in the sudden quietness, as if a storm had passed, I stood frozen. The way back home, overwhelmed by exhaustion, the argument between the two flashed through my mind. She lied again about going to a job interview. It seems there's trouble brewing between that couple too. Later, while I was finishing my artwork at home, the doorbell rang. Wondering who it could be during the day, I peeked through the intercom's monitor to see my stepmother's figure. How did my stepmother get into this apartment, which is supposed to be securely protected and not easily accessible? Moreover, how did she manage to find this place? Shocked, my hand accidentally hit a vase, causing a loud noise as it fell to the floor. Fortunately, the vase didn't break, but the sound might have reached outside the door. I gasped. "Susan! You're in there, right? Open the door!" My stepmother outside kept knocking and loudly calling my name, risking a nuisance to the neighbors. If this situation continues, it will become a nuisance to the neighbors. Unable to bear it any longer, I cracked open the front door. "Don't shout! And what the heck? How did you get in? How do you know where I live?" Then, upon seeing my face, my stepmother attempted to cling to me, crying, as if to beg for comfort. This was a stark and eerie contrast to the stepmother who had always looked down on me and berated me, leaving me unable to hide my shock. "Susan, I wanted to see you so much. By chance, I found a document with your address on it at home. That made me want to visit, but the entrance hall security was so strict, I couldn't get in easily. Luckily, a delivery person came by, so I pretended to be a resident and snuck in with them." What does she mean snuck in? The excuse of accidentally finding my address in a document is far too convenient. A journalist who should absolutely protect the privacy of their interviewee would surely handle my personal information carefully, never leaving it in a place where it could be seen. "Your lies are transparent. You must have stolen your husband's important documents to rummage through them for my address. I don't know what you want, but leave. I have no need for you here. If you don't leave soon, I'll call security." My guess was right. However, my stepmother froze like a stone, unwilling to leave. "I just wanted to see you and looked at my husband's documents a bit. Actually, I have something to ask of you." The demands she continued with were selfish and unforgivable, further fueling my anger. 13 years ago, my stepmother had driven me out of the house, living a life of luxury with my father's wealth and the insurance money received, but eventually, that money ran out, and she began looking for a kind man who could support her in her desperation. And luckily, she welcomed the magazine journalist she met as her new husband. My stepmother, appearing to be a kind and gentle woman, was skilled at attracting men with her looks, but her true nature was that of a vain, brand-obsessed person who sought an easy life by depending solely on wealthy men, undoubtedly a despicable human being. Despite running through the household finances with her shopping addiction for brands and going out daily, she even started dipping into her husband, the journalist's, savings secretly when the money ran out. When her extravagant spending was discovered and she was severely reprimanded, she only made excuses about working to pay it back, never actually seeking employment, which infuriated the journalist. Yet, my stepmother couldn't escape her dependence on branded goods and started visiting consumer finance companies. Her debts, with no means of repayment, quickly ballooned, and she found herself wandering the streets in despair when she spotted me looking out from a cafe window. "Back then, I never imagined you'd turn out to be so successful and on the winning side." She started buttering me up. I see, that's her angle. There's only one reason she's come to me. "I really want to pay off my debts soon. Could you lend me some money, just a little? I promise I'll definitely pay it back." This person, who would cling to anyone for money and use any means for her own desires, like a parasite, looked at me with tearful eyes, trying to garner sympathy. Despite feeling outraged by her ridiculous act and pathetic display, I managed to suppress my rising anger, unable to raise my voice inside the apartment. "If you want to borrow money, look elsewhere. I don't have a penny to lend you." I closed the door. I felt so helpless. My father's money had been wasted on such a worthless woman. Then, my stepmother started banging on the door from outside again, shouting, "Open up. Don't get cocky just because you're making a little money now. Do you have any idea what I went through to take care of you? Don't I deserve any gratitude? You traitor." What does she mean by traitor? I wanted to throw those words right back at her. To rid myself of the nuisance causing a commotion outside, I contacted the security guard, then called my husband. My stepmother was quickly taken away by the security guard who had arrived. Despite her vile screaming and desperate resistance, she was no match for the security guard's strength. Her voice faded away into the distance. 10 minutes later, my husband returned home. Actually, I married a police officer who works at the local precinct 5 years ago, and we lived together in this apartment. Jokingly calling himself my bodyguard since I became famous, he is a reliable husband who would protect me with all his might if anything happened. He was off duty and had gone to the nearby gym that day, but he rushed back as soon as I called him. My husband, who knew about my estranged stepmother and our unexpected encounter at the cafe where I was showered with undeserved verbal abuse, immediately went to the security office after hearing the whole story from me and took the raging stepmother to the precinct. According to what my husband told me that night, my stepmother continued her nonsensical shouting at the precinct, leaving the officers baffled. The journalist, who came to take responsibility for her, was furious upon her arrival, and for a moment, the precinct was thrown into chaos. After sharing everything I had told him with the journalist, the fact that she had been in debt was a complete shock to him, and his anger surged. In addition to being irritated by her past behavior, having the interview appointment with me ruined, and finding out she had secretly been in debt, his patience reached its limit, and he started making a scene about getting a divorce. Overwhelmed by the humiliation of being unable to escape her debts, being taken away by the police as a suspicious person, and then having the husband she relied on for money propose divorce, my stepmother must have felt unbearable disgrace. Losing her composure, she began to shout incoherently and lash out, eventually being subdued by the police. Thus, a long day came to an end. Later, the journalist visited our home with a box of sweets. Reflecting on his lapse in security that allowed my stepmother to see important documents, he deeply apologized to us for the significant inconvenience caused by her causing a scene in front of our house. I urged him to lift his head immediately and gladly accepted the request for another interview. And later, I was finally able to sit down for the interview. When I shared the story of my relationship with my stepmother, he was astounded, exclaiming, "I knew you had a stepchild from a deceased former husband who was out of touch, but I never imagined it was you." The magazine subsequently featured an article on me as a genius painter, loved dearly by my parents yet leading a life full of turmoil, a story that quickly captivated the public's attention. My story was even broadcasted on TV, further sparking a boom in my artworks. According to what the reporter told me during the interview, even after being reprimanded by him, it was discovered that my stepmother had been dipping into his savings without permission, which only fueled his anger further. Consequently, there was no division of assets at the time of their divorce, and my stepmother was left with nothing. After several attempts to find a new source of dependency, my stepmother struggled to attract men as she had in her youth, unable to compete with her age. Eventually deciding to work on her own without relying on others' money, she faced difficulty securing employment due to her lack of worldly experience, inability to cooperate, and zero work history, managing only to find a cleaning job which she lost within a few months. Inherent in her was a terrible habit of skipping work without notice and going home whenever she disliked something at work, causing headaches for her employers. Yet, having never worked before, she refused to acknowledge her own faults, causing a commotion upon being fired. With nowhere to go, her only reliance became consumer loans, as her debt continued to spiral out of control. The stepmother once made a single phone call to the journalist. "Help! Someone is chasing me!" Whether it was a hallucination or reality, her voice seemed terrified and trembling. However, annoyed by her call, the journalist set her number to be blocked. Since then, they've been estranged, and now, it's unclear where or what the stepmother is doing. Likely, she's hiding from debt collectors, possibly screaming somewhere, attacked by her hallucinations. Meanwhile, my husband and I moved and started a new life. The artwork I'm currently working on is a continuation of what my mother had been painting before she passed away without finishing it. If I ever become a recognized painter, I plan to complete my mother's piece and present it to the world as a joint work of mother and child. That was the promise I made with my mother before she died. With the end of my long years of hard work and my paintings now gaining recognition in the world, I believe I can awaken my mother's spirit in this piece. So, I took up my brush. Effort never betrays. Those who believe in themselves and never give up are the ones who truly grasp glory and happiness. A parasitic life will eventually come to an end. Those were the last words the journalist said to my stepmother. These words, echoing my own beliefs, are deeply engraved in my heart. And today, my husband and I welcomed another serene morning. My husband, who has a mild temperament similar to my father's, loves my work more than anyone and supports me closely. There could be nothing happier than continuing to live a peaceful life with my husband, my #1 fan. Today, too, I joined my hands in front of the photos of my mother and father.